working with Fanuv robots here today. Fanuv LR made 200 ID, and the overall goal was the semester was to try and see what we could do with the robot a little bit, but to also get it to take these 4 individual pieces and assemble them into one, completed product. And cylinder base, a centerpiece, a spring, and a blue cap. And get that blue cap screw on and deposit it into a completed product position. Now it's very simple to do with your hands, but getting a robot to do that is a very different story. It took us approximately 3-4 months to get the whole process completed for the red and silver cylinders, and about 1 day for the black cylinders. The biggest trick was just learning how to do the overall steps. But once we understood and learned each, it was much smoother to repeat the process. Now, I did mention 2 different colors. If you'll notice, the red and silver cylinders in front of you are the same height. The black cylinder is a different height. That was the biggest trick. How do we get it to differentiate between these 2 and to run different steps for these 2? Very similar steps, but those small differences will completely change what your robot's going to do. It's very sensitive, will crash if you don't take the time to teach it how to do the spring. Something we did, our group chose to do, is you have the robot, and it has several photo eyes and proximity switches all over it. We had to use the Fanuv and see which digital inputs the Festo trainer had, what they associated with. For example, this proximity switch photo eye right here, all this does is tell you there's a cylinder present. Once the robot saw that, it knew it could move down and it could check. It would move down next to and it would check this cylinder. There's a little photo eye on the side of the robot. If it knew that there was a part present, this all did was tell us reflectivity. It knew there was a part present and it could see the reflection of the cylinder and knew it was either a red or a silver cylinder since they were the same height. But the black cylinder is not very reflective. There's a part present, but it did not reflect very well, or it did not reflect at all. It knew it was a black cylinder. We built a small program at the very beginning to differentiate between those 2 colors. It was basically a series of what-if statements. If you have a part present and you don't see it, it is a black cylinder. You now run the main black cylinder program. And the same thing, if you do have a part present and you do see reflection, it's a red or silver cylinder, you run this program. And then we made 2 very large programs for both of those. Would you like to go?
We already part present?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so once it determined the reflectivity, it would then come, the robot would then come down, pick up the cylinder, and bring it over here to the prop switch over here where it would determine where the holes were at the bottom. When it brings it over, it would set it down, it would begin to turn. Once the output went off, it knew it was at an empty spot. It would turn back in the other direction and determine where the other hole was. And then the robot then had some math calculations to determine where the center of this hole was, and then would bring the part back up and bring it over. I guess you can see it from down here. It's a slot right here where it sets the cap down on a peg, and that way, you know, it'll be centered for the spring.
Then we're going to take the centerpiece, something set in there.
Okay, yeah, they need to be.
So what are some of the issues you guys ran into when you first started finding the center hole? So essentially what happened, guys, was they did a search and find. So they created a point back here and told the robot to go to that point. And what they did was they said, we want to skip a condition if the robot moves towards that point and it sees a digital input come on. So hopefully we'd see a digital input come on and we could skip the condition and find the other side of the hole. All right, so once we did that, we found the other side of the hole. Like they said, they had to do some math instructions, so they had to put that into their program. And then once you had that problem, what was the next problem you were running into?
The indicator would turn.
Right.
Turn back to the original position, so we had to use a tool offset to keep the end effector in the right position and pick it back up and bring it over.
Right.
And set the cap down and it'll still be in the right spot.
So they were very used to creating positions here and there. So when they went to create a position to set the cap back in the hole and then they'd run it, what they'd find is the robot would perfectly find the center of the hole, but then when it would go to that position, the robot would turn it off of the center of that hole and try to set it down at the position they taught it, because the position they were finding it at was random every time. So then they had to use
Two
offsets. So
As you mentioned, you have these 3 holes in the bottom, but if you have a different person loading each of these each time, you have no idea how this is faced, how it's turned.
right.
The robot will pick up, the robot will turn it around and find those holes. But if all you've done is tell this robot, move from here to here, it will move in the exact same way every time, and it doesn't take into account the positioning on each of these holes.
So guys, tell us a little bit about the pistons.
Okay, so using pistons, these go in the center of every one of these cylinders. As Stan mentioned earlier, the cylinders are 2 different heights, but the holes in the center are also 2 different diameters. So essentially, whenever we knew which programs we were running, based off whether it was red or black, from the sensor in the robot, we would go and choose one of the 2 pistons. One of the things we did have an interesting time figuring out was how to pick up the next piston in order. So what we ended up doing again is using our offsets, and we were adding to our offset every time we would pick up one of these pistons. So we would add I think about 24 millimeters in between each piston after we pick it up, so we know where the next one is. And then we would add one to a register in our robot's memory, so that way once that register equals a certain amount, it would be able to reset itself back to 0. And it would just take this piston and put it over there, and then it would add all of the stuff to its registries and memories, so it would come back to the next piston and put it back over there. And then it'd do the same with silver, essentially.
All right. So what was the next step, guys?
Spring.
Okay. So tell us about the spring shootout.
It was the spring. That was a little less complicated, I think. We had to figure out the advance output and return output for the piston. Basically, we just turned the advance one on, then the piston would extend out, shoot a piston out into the set position, and turn the rope. Teach the robot to come over, pick the spring up, and move back, and the piston will retract out of the way. Well, it was already retracted out of the way, I'm sorry. We bring the spring out and then retract.
Okay.
And then the robot will come over, pick up the spring, and we had to teach all these points. We will come back up, and then come over to the cylinder, which already had the piston in there, and set the spring down on top of the piston, and then come back to the home position.
And then lastly, what do we have?
The last part would be a little top here. If you notice, I told you that you can grab it, and you will see that it has tabs in there that are separated at equal distance. What it needs to do is go into the cylinder in a way that won't interfere with the tab in there, and then it will remove it. So we will pick it up from here, all the way here, bring it to this center here, and start rotating until we find the leading edge. Once we do that, by the offset inside the memory, it will turn it back until we find the trailing edge. Once we find both points, automatically we will divide in two, and you will find the right position, pick it up, bring it, go all the way down, and then twist it. And then pretty much we complete to average the piston and the spring was done in there. And all is done by the manipulation of the offset, the register line, divided by the function inside the rubber stamp. So it sounds very, very easy, but it wasn't.
So, and then lastly, it picks it up, puts it where, guys?
It's in the little finish tubes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Our finished products was here. We had 2 tubes, one for black cylinders, one for red and silver cylinders.
Okay. All right. So let's see it run here. If you want to grab the key and stick it in automatic here. We'll do a red and black cylinder on each section there.
Oh. Hopefully we'll be no problem this time.
Skip through it.
We're gonna-
No, you can just 100%.
Oh, you know what we should do? We should do one black, one white, one black.
Oh, yeah, because
That's how we're
I
doing.
think we're only doing one of each.
Can I go get theirs?
Oh, yeah.
Are we racing? Is it happening?
You just keep it right there. Right a second.
Make sure to stay clear.
Yeah.
All right, so Stan, you guys are gonna go first.
Let me be this way just in
Oh,
case.
yeah.
Other man.
Let's practice social distance. Just for safety. Check your emergency button.
And speed up. We're ready.
So one thing too, there was like a 2-second wait there, right? Before it goes down to pick it up. And it sits there and waits a second just to make sure it registers a good color.
I integrated the 2-second wait. The idea was if this was a manufacturing plant, you're going to have an operator going in and loading the individual piece for the robot. And the idea was the robot will not move until this person has time to clear. We don't have light currents and you're in to do that, so I just had to simulate this, put a 2-second delay.
Let's go on and get a black one ready for you guys, us two,
Yeah.
on this side over here.
They have a black one ready.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to. As mentioned, one of the trickiest parts of this was getting it, how to get the robot to move, pick up something and move over without turning around in midair.
There you
All
go.
right.
Not the red one.
So if you do another red one, will it get the next piston?
We're gonna need a piece of.
No, it's already.
Oh, it's alright? That's weird.
Yes, it should pick up the next piston.
Yeah, what's the one thing?
Which one you want? Or you-
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that works.
As Nathan mentioned, there's a series of 4 of these center pieces. We had to figure out how to write one program, but entering into the program to get the robot to move forward and grabbing new pistons each time, or center piece, I'm sorry, each time. Our group actually had 2 different methods for doing these steps. I believe I mentioned we used 2 large programs for each cylinder color.
We ended up calling a bunch of like smaller programs individually, and they're each named like each individual task. So we have one for black cylinder, red cylinder pickup, piston pickups, and springs and caps.
All right, guys.
Green button.
Press the green button.
You have to reset it.
No, it's on. I can feel that thing.
Your
The emergency.
pendant off. Is your pendant